Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of My Future Energy Career. My name is Jalen Choi and I will be interviewing today's STEM hero, Dr. Cris Liban. So Cris works as a Chief Sustainability Officer at LA Metro. Again, we're so happy to have you here today, and without further ado, I will pass it off to him and he can tell us a little bit about his career.
Yeah, thank you, Jalen. I'll just have a few slides to complement, what I'm going to talk about. And primarily, I'll focus on three major things: where I'm from, what my life's choices were, growing up in my home country, the Philippines, and moving here in the United States, and eventually, my career here as an environmental engineer and now the chief sustainability officer of third largest transportation agency in the whole country. So this map pretty much shows, where all the different countries are, around the world, and the icon that you will see here, that's where we are. That's where California is, and within that small spot there is where I am situated here in the Los Angeles area. And in the next slide, you will see essentially the icon jump, and that's where the Philippines is. In the next slide, will show you a little bit better of the perspective of where physically the Philippines is relative to the other countries in Asia. And then that's to the left, an orange arrow shows up, as you see here, and that's Manila. Points out to the city of Manila. That's where I was born. I grew up in the suburbs of Manila, and I essentially went for majority of my schooling. This particular slide just shows you a little bit of the different views and vistas of the country. The Philippines consists of 7,100 plus islands, and the next slide shows you, what we call as the Chocolate Hills in the island of Bohol. And the next picture essentially shows what we call as the Banaue rice terraces, one of the great wonders of the world. And then the next slide shows you what we call as the Mayon volcano. This is a volcano in the province called Legazpi Albay. It's the most perfect cone volcano in the world. This is also the place where my wife grew up, where Mayon volcano is. As you can imagine, essentially waking up in the morning and seeing, that volcano. The next picture in this particular slide provides you, a perspective of what I have seen, when I grew up. I talked a little bit about my wife and the beautiful volcano that she sees every morning. On the right side here is what I saw every single morning when I grew up. On the horizon there is the skyline of Manila, and around that area on the bottom of the screen pretty much are the houses that where people live. Significant number of these houses are houses made out of plywood, and people live in these areas, and they work pretty much the big buildings that you see there on the horizon. From a developing nation, right, when there's and majority of the people don't have any running water. You have air pollution everywhere. Transportation is challenging, to say the least. A lot of the people, including us, essentially were just thinking about surviving. You tend to use the least amount of water, eat pretty much all the food on your plate, don't have a whole lot of trash because, it's going to further pollute the environment. And because electricity and water and everything else is very expensive, you grow up with your parents telling you to don't let the water run, while you're brushing your teeth, because that's very expensive, or turn off the lights when you leave the room. And, we didn't talk about sustainability. We don't know what that is, but we lived it.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Definitely a valuable and different perspective than we have here in the States.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yep.
Yeah. We will move on to some of your childhood curiosities.
Never really had the luxury of too many toys. My dad brought us some toys, or bought us some toys, I should say. And for the most part, while we have some toys that we can play with inside the house, we always tried to play outside. And that's whenever we challenged to make our own toys. And then always are challenged to create new games with other kids. As you can see here in the slide, it's one of those, games wherein you absolutely don't see anything except, pavement and lines in the ground and two opposing teams. I also collected stamps, a lot of stamps. That's the way for me to go in different parts of the world. I always loved nature as well. And in a series of pictures that you will see here, I've always seen living in a tropical country in the Philippines. I've always seen, caterpillars around any time of the year. There's caterpillars around. And then, the next set of pictures, just show you what I've experienced when I was growing up. I've seen these caterpillars transform into beautiful butterflies. You could see here in this picture. Spent a lot of time with other kids in their homes. It was very common for us to be with other families and share our experiences, played with. And I think, this is quite interesting to note, I had no clue what science, technology, engineering, mathematics, also called STEM, didn't know what that meant. I just enjoyed life. I just enjoyed life as a kid, and I just knew that I wanted to go outside and explore the world.
Yeah, moving on, we'll talk about your journey immigrating to America.
Yeah, I moved here when I was a teenager, in college already, but I was still a teenager. And it was scary because I've always known only one country, Philippines. Moving here as a kid and going back to the Philippines to finish up college, it's an adjustment, a new way of life. I've always wondered again, what it is and what it looks like in other parts of the world. But moving here really changed my attitude towards this country. It's living in different worlds. I would go here during the summer, I would go back to the Philippines, to finish up college. In my mind, it's the best of both worlds. I go back to a country that has a significant amount of people living in poverty, small number of people who live very affluent lives. And then, every summer I go here, pretty much, experience something similar. In many parts of back then, we were living in Washington, D.C. There are poor areas but, it changed my perspective. Uh, I try to identify in three ways. I am a Filipino because I come from the Philippines. I am an American because I chose the United States as my country. But I'm also a Filipino-American. And that label, pretty much defines, the unity of the culture in the way of thinking, that I personify in everything that I do, whether at work, whether with all of our stakeholders and the people that we work with, in our communities, and helping them understand that, hey, we have different labels and we live those labels, but there should be no specific distinction of one label over the other. They actually all complement one another. We've always looked at America as this country that only had the greatest things that the world has to offer. The fastest cars, the really nice homes, Disneyland, all of these things. But when I moved here and started living here, never really imagined an America where there are actually people who are sleeping in the streets and dying on the street. Never really imagined America, and this was just in the later parts of my residence here. Never really imagined an America wherein there are some people who just hate other people. I never grew up like that. I told you earlier, when I was growing up, I just played with everybody. No matter who you are. I enjoyed that. We moved in suburbs of Virginia when I was a teenager and we immigrated here. People were very friendly, but I could see and sense the separation of people, and it's always been a puzzle to me of how that is. But now I understand, and I'm making a difference of it, not only in some of the advocacies I have, but in the work that I do as well.
Thank you again for sharing that. And next, we'll move into some of your education.
Yeah, I mean, this is play on some of these phrases that I put in here, right? Education is simply hammered in our minds, when we were kids. we had no choice but to go beyond high school, but we enjoyed it. Don't get me wrong. I did. My parents didn't force me to do what I needed to do. Particular case, it was just natural. Everybody around you is eternally curious. We enjoyed talking about things that would require us to hunt for answers, and there was no internet back then when I was growing up. And so, you would look at the books and look for the answers in those books, and you talk about it. But what I learned though is that the more I learn, the more I know less. And in that particular case, it feeds itself. Eventually, I said, why not? Why not go to college? Go to grad school. And then this really cool point of wearing a toga. Where else can you be proud wearing a toga, right? Only in graduation. It's a symbol of achievement and makes my parents proud, my community proud, and makes me proud at the same time. And so, again, why not? There's no downside to getting educated and knowing a lot more than what you know now. I just want to show here not only my family, but I'm doing the things that I do because I'm doing it for my wife, my son, and it's a manifestation of what my parents have done to me, as a kid. I just want to pass it on and make a difference in my family's life. And then, next picture here is really all about the community. This is just a picture of a farmer's market in South LA. I've always wanted go down to our community members, talk to them. And one of those great things and great opportunities to do that is in farmers markets. And just wanted to show here picture of a real picture of people that we've dealt with in the past, and how that's key and very important to me in my work. And lastly, I work for a transportation agency for the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority. A mouthful. I don't expect anyone to say that. LA Metro, in short, as they say. But in LA Metro, while we're a transportation agency, we're really all about environmental stewardship. We're really all about taking care of the people who may not necessarily be able to go from one place of the city to the other, and transporting them places where they have never been in. Just a factoid, I've learned this only recently, that a significant number of the kids here in LA County who live a few miles from the ocean never really have gone and never knew anything about the ocean. So think about that, and think about, how lucky some of us are to be living near the ocean. And through LA Metro, the agency I work with, we're bringing a lot of those kids and their parents again to places where they've never been.
Awesome. Yeah. Moving on, we'll go a little bit about your career in university.
Yeah, just very quickly, University of the Philippines is where I went. University of the People. This is the public university, the premier public university in the country. I remember I was a junior in high school, and I was talking to my dad and like, hey dad, what would be a good career choice? And he's like, I don't know. My dad's an engineer, right? And he never mentioned engineering. And I said, well, maybe geology, So I have no clue what that is. I really thought of maybe that's a good pathway to open my eyes to not only the world, but, using that as a gateway for what I call as, social prosperity. What I thought back then was, oh, maybe I can discover, the biggest, mine in the world, or the biggest oil field in the world through geology, maybe make the country rich, right? But, as I went through that, I realized that it's much more than that. It's really opening up a lot of opportunities for myself, for the people I live with, for my colleagues back then. Having that kind of background in STEM is not gateway to prosperity, but opens up opportunities I've never really imagined. And then on the bottom right, you see this gentleman whose arms are open up to the world. That is called the oblation. That's the symbol of the University of the Philippines. What that really means is I will be there where there's a need. World, I'm here for you, and I will serve you. And that's kind of like a big driver for me in the things that I do. We were really forced to invent things. We have a challenge in funding, for example, in laboratories, right? One of the classic stories I always tell people when is, we were doing a chemistry experiment, for example, and then the workbook says, oh, put 2 milligrams of this chemical into an Erlenmeyer flask. And I look around the laboratory, and there's no Erlenmeyer flask, but there's a peanut butter jar sitting in the corner, you know, or and then say, okay, why don't you put that in, put some water, and then light up the Bunsen burner, and put the Erlenmeyer flask, and now it's a peanut butter jar. onto this stove, and I look around like there's no Bunsen burner, there is no stove, so we kind of improvise, to build up some stand, for this peanut butter jar with some chemical in it and some water to actually do its chemical reaction in there, right? So it's an interesting discovery of STEM, because in that particular example, I'm forced to think like a scientist and solve problems like an engineer. I had nothing else but my brain to do that experiment. Again, maybe it's good, maybe it's bad to live in a developing nation where you absolutely have nothing to go by, like the luxuries of our educational system here in the United States, and being open to that kind of environment and inventing things because I had to do it.
Yeah, awesome. I love that story. Very, very funny with the peanut jar. And
Yeah.
I think that's a moment for us to really appreciate the educational system we have here in the United States. And next, we'll move into graduate school.
It's a natural for me to go to graduate school. I did mention this earlier. I didn't want to be at a certain age in my life or at a career in a phase of my life when I would wonder what or how different my life would be without graduate school. Just looking back, it really solidified this idea that we are a connected planet. I've met so many people in my life while going back and forth to the Philippines, coming here, growing up at a very young age, and then working for 3 years, going to grad school, working for 3 more years, and then going for a doctorate in environmental science engineering. And one thing that I did mention this earlier about science and engineering. Science really about asking the question. I was trained like a scientist. I was trained as a scientist, I should say. But I thought that was very limiting for me. To be trained as a scientist. I saw myself as a problem solver, and so in grad school, I rewired my brain to think like an engineer. The interesting part about that is the scientist in me, did not really leave. I think that's something that any of the kids in your audience are thinking about, what you may want to do or study later in life, having that powerful combination of being able to ask the very difficult questions, but at the same time, being able to think about the solutions while you're asking the questions. That is very powerful. I just train my brain to think that way, and I encourage everyone who wants to go down that path. Not everyone will be going down that path, but those who are interested and who wants to go that path, I encourage you to explore that possibility and try to enjoy that outcome, when you get there. For the most part, majority of the world does not really live like us. I relate that to a social issue, right? That I deal with in some of our communities here in Los Angeles. The access to fresh food. A lot of our communities, including in some of the communities I've lived in, we see a lot of liquor stores, but not a whole lot of groceries. And in many of those same communities or grocery stores might be in existence. The fresh food that they sell in those groceries are not top notch, unlike in some communities where there's affluence, and people can actually buy first grade, high grade quality food compared to the one I'm describing. It's a world of difference. And I've seen that. I work in a transportation agency. One part of me as a scientist is asking, well, we have transportation system, we have a problem of fresh food access. We have these very poor communities that have transportation system, the one we provide, but only have liquor stores and limited number of grocery stores. My team and I asked the very difficult question: how can we enhance our services and our messaging to these communities so that these communities who don't necessarily have the access to better groceries, fresh food markets, that they'll be able to discover the transportation system that we're building so they can go to those communities where there's fresh food. So that was the hard question.
Mhm.
And as a scientist, you have to ask that question. In this particular case, as a social scientist or as a pure scientist, you have to ask that very hard question. But as an engineer, you put your engineer hat on. Now you can like, okay, so now we have that. How do we now build transportation networks so that people in those poor communities can actually access fresh food? So you tend to engineer those solutions and think about them in ways that has never necessarily been done before, and you mix and match different ingredients that you have to solve those kinds of problems. In that example, the issue is maybe straightforward: fresh food access in very poor communities. But as a scientist, you need to ask the hard questions, and as an engineer, you need to see and look for the very innovative solutions, given that you don't have everything in front of you that's available for you for an ideal solution.
Yeah, and I feel like that's been kind of a theme going on with this interview is you don't always have everything that you need to solve a problem. So you have to use your mind to innovate and create new
Yep.
solutions. So yeah,
Yep.
very, very much enjoy that point. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
But moving on, a little bit about what shaped your character.
Yeah, I did talk about this earlier. The oblation is there again on the left. I'm a citizen of the world. Here I am. I prepared myself. I'm here to serve. Again, I've seen that oblation. I've gone through that road, that you see there on the horizon every single morning, and that's what greets me as I enter the University of the Philippines. But at the same time, a lot of the people that I see as I go to school are the people that you see in the house that you see on the right of the screen. On the top right of that screen is a child who does not necessarily go to school. Is probably 8, 9 years old, but is picking trash to essentially sell for whatever it's worth. And that's just to bring food, to the family at the end of the day. And, a lot of these kids and their families live in homes you see on the bottom right of your screen. I've been in many of these communities. I've spent nights there while I was in college, and just really trying to understand and what it means to live in these kinds of environments so that I can better prepare and think about how to make a difference in the world. And really, at the end of the day, the theme of this slide, and you just focus on what I'm saying right now, is that we all have a different lived experience. By immersing ourselves in the realities of today, will really shape how we deal with the solutions of tomorrow. And that's what the point is of this slide.
Yeah, very, very impactful point right there. I think it is very important, especially for students here living in America, to be at least educated to different communities such as this who come from conditions like the ones you've pointed out here. My question for you is, a lot of the time, I feel like organizations and agencies try to help communities such as the ones depicted here, but are not exactly in touch with those communities.
Yep.
So I was wondering, for those agencies and organizations, but also for people like us, how can we get in touch with these communities and really learn about the needs they have, the needs they deserve? How can we connect more with these communities to understand that?
Yeah, and for the most part, I really like what the Energy Coalition is doing here. Exposing your students, your audience to people like myself have tried to make a difference. Through the STEM and related work. On the other hand, I think we also need to revisit our mindset. The rest of the world may not necessarily look like us, while we have the technological advancement in this country, while we have our shared experience in solving the most difficult solutions. I did mention earlier, when you asked me about what I knew about sustainability growing up, these solutions that we talk about and we think about and we promote in other parts of the state or other parts of the country may not necessarily make sense, culturally make sense to communities like I've lived in and grew up in the Philippines. And so the point I'm trying to make with that, there is a place and time where not-for-profit organizations or organizations like the Energy Coalition, wherein organizations can actually describe and discuss and work solutions into the problems. But over the long term, the key to the solutions into the success of those communities actually lie in themselves, and by encouraging them to think about those kinds of culturally sensitive solutions on their own and facilitating that kind of conversation will accelerate innovation that may not necessarily be happening if not for the facilitated conversations NGOs are trying to promote. There's a place in time where help is needed, and there's a place in time where giving is needed. But human beings are human beings, and there is a more sustainable strategy of allowing human beings and teaching human beings to actually be most productive, culturally sensitive solutions for their own and to solve their own problems. And that's really the mindset that we need to emphasize more versus people essentially receiving what's being given to them all the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I couldn't agree more. I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Yeah, moving on, we'll talk a little bit more about your career though.
Yeah, just very quickly, I started out as, what we call as a consultant, and that's really helping out companies in a private organization. I had a very accelerated trajectory in my career. As a 20-year-old, I wanted to get pretty much all the certificates that I can get my hands on, all the degrees I can have my hands on. As a 29, 30-year-old, I was a very successful professional. As I've said here, success is not always good. My trajectory was so fast, and I achieved the things that I have envisioned achieving in a much shorter period of time. So you're 29 years old and you're looking at to working until you're 65 or so. You have 35 more years to go. And it's like, is this it? That kind of thing. And so what I did there was that literally quit that job and went to public service, reinvented myself. Started out pretty much at towards the second to the lowest position, here in LA Metro. Worked into positions that were never existing, when I started here. Just to put that into a visual, when I started here in a transportation agency, the highest position that one can aspire for is a manager. And when I started here back in 2003, manager position is only two positions above. And I plan to work for another 35 years. Success breeds success, because of the success of my team, the things that we've done here in the agency over the course of 10 years. At least 6 additional mid-level and executive positions were created above that manager position. And then I occupied every single one of them. I competed for every single one of them. It's not a shoe-in. Those positions were not necessarily created for me, but I competed for every single one of them. But how I looked at that, now being a chief sustainability officer, I looked at that as, as I go into the maturity of my career, leaving LA Metro and looking at where we were from 2003 to now, I see those positions that were created, that I occupied in the span of 12 years as an opportunity for people who are coming after me to occupy. And that's the power of it. It's the most fulfilling vision and idea I've ever seen and have never ever imagined in this job and in this agency. We move more than 1 million people per day to allow people to go to communities where they've never imagined. We move people from South LA to Malibu, from North County down to Long Beach, and anywhere in between. And then at the same time, those activities build harmony with our environment, and that's the power of transportation.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I do feel like sometimes we do take for granted how important public transportation is and how
Yeah.
connected it makes us as a community. Yeah, for now, you can talk about some of your day-to-day activities.
We plan, build, operate the transportation system across LA County. The 16th largest economy in the world. I'm focused on climate change and extreme weather events so that in the reduction in the impacts of climate and extreme weather events, so that our movement and transportation of people and goods are not impacted. We build really cool, exciting things, that save energy and water. Focus for a moment, not on me in that picture, but on the things that are around me. You have solar panels that we have on that rooftop. Our headquarters in the background there, the brown building that was built not as a green building, but we converted it to be a green building. We not only save money, not only reduce the impact on the environment, but allow the people who work there really enjoy good quality of air, good quality of water, quality of working space. Yeah, and this one is really just some pictures of real people in real events. We work with communities to make a positive change in the place we live in. Can't emphasize enough. Transportation, the upper picture is, you could see from the sign, it's a little bit blurry, but we actually have artwork at many of these stations. For those who are interested in visiting our stations and enjoy art at the same time, we have docents who actually bring people through the trains for free, and you could appreciate the art, like this one on the sign. These docents describe the art, at the stations that we have all across LA County. And then on the bottom picture there is that we work with a company called Ciclavia, and every so often, before the pandemic, we would close certain streets in Los Angeles where cars generally travel into, and then we open that up to cyclists and pedestrians, and for them to enjoy that feeling of actually being one in nature here in Los Angeles. We work with Ciclavia and some other community leaders. We try to bring that experience to everybody, not only here in LA, but in the city, but in other parts of Los Angeles region as well. And then we work with everyone, from children to leaders of nations. I've met, many ministers of the world. I've met president of the Philippines in particular. Work with children as well. What we're trying to do here is an example of it. I have my big advocacy for women and girls. For peoples of color. People who look like me. And I try to advocate, for those communities, to make sure not only are they visible, but more importantly, to bring the kind of perspective that those communities may not necessarily have an opportunity for, and to push those who dare work with me, dare to travel this life with me, for us, to actually make a difference, not only in the words that we say, but in the actions that we do, coming from people who look like us. And that's the key. We have as equal of an opportunity as anyone else. We need to create that for ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. And yeah, some great points once again being made by our STEM hero. Moving on, we'll just talk about a book your wife is working on and some advice you can offer to students.
Yeah, I mean, in this book, I wrote a chapter with my wife. There's this letter that my wife and I wrote for our son JP, and for other kids, and just want to point out, 6 things in here. There's a lot more in that letter, but just 6 things that I thought I should say would be good for our interview here. Maximizing your potential. Failure is an option. Don't be afraid. Just do. Whenever an opportunity comes up, take it. It's okay to ask for help. Positive thinking is key. If you have people who always tell you that, hey, Cris, you can't really do that, forget about that statement. Do it anyway, and try to make the best use of that opportunity. Emphasize it here again, be continually curious. Always try to be that individual who may never reach perfection, but through the practice of life, we become better individuals. And, have fun in life. We only have one. Don't be too hard on yourself. A lot of people get really stressed about, the things that they don't have, or the things that they can't achieve, or the things that they want to do but don't have the means for. Be the opposite. Look at what you have. Look at what's around you. Invent things think about what you can do despite the fact that there's not a whole lot to go by. Go back to my story of the laboratory again earlier. We're supposed to do an experiment, but there's no equipment. Don't do the experiment? No. Well, let's still do the experiment and build the equipment.
Again, just great advice coming from Dr. Cris here. But yeah, to wrap up, we have the student question portion of this webinar. What projects are you currently working on right now? I know you mentioned earlier about access to fresh and healthy food, but I was just wondering, are there any other projects that you're working on? And within those projects, what about it gives you that fulfillment?
With sincere gratitude to all the taxpayers of LA County, we are building the most transformative transportation network that we've ever seen in our lifetime, not only in this county, not only in this state, but maybe in this world. The transportation system is the backbone of the economic activity here in this region. Being part of that transformative activity not only allows us, myself and my team, to build innovative things that would reduce the impacts of climate and extreme weather events, but actually think about in that system that we're building to include, those ideas and technologies and systems for us to make a difference in people's lives. We're creating high-paying jobs because of this building, planning, and operating that we're doing right now. We're connecting communities, allowing those communities to go to places within LA County where they've never been before or where they've never thought of before. At the same time, allowing other industries in other sectors of our economy to be one LA, one community. It's fulfilling to think of that by itself. And it's more fulfilling to know that in the next few more years, we can literally see these things shape up and come up and complement, the vistas and the views that we now have here in LA, and appreciate the innovations in the hands of the people, in the minds of the people who not only thought of those, but actually created them for the people of Los Angeles County, including you, including me, our audience, and the people who visit us here in this region.
Yeah, couldn't have asked for a better answer to my question. I would just like to take this time to say a big, big, big thank you to Dr. Cris Liban for coming on today and sharing a little bit about your career, your passion, and your education on this webinar. Yeah, and I would also like to give a big thanks to all of you viewing today. If you would like to access our other STEM Hero videos, you can check our profile, The Energy Coalition, out on Vimeo or YouTube, or you can head over to peakstudents.org to see our full library of STEM Hero interviews.